The whole idea of this session is to bring to St. Kitts some information which hopefully will help entrepreneurs have a better chance of success in the digital space. We all use the internet for all of the other things, Facebook, WhatsApp. Well, if you say Facebook, well, the younger generation will know that you are one of the older persons, because apparently it's only old people these days who use Facebook, and the young people use Instagram, Twitter. Oh, there's some young people in here. Amicia clearly is a young person. And but the whole idea is that there's a lot happening on the internet, and from a Caribbean perspective, what we are trying to do is to enable Caribbean entrepreneurs to take advantage of some of the business opportunities that present themselves in this domain name system space. So as we go through the presentation, and perhaps somebody can take me to the next slide, please, because the clicker doesn't seem to be cooperating. Okay, good. So did I miss a whole slide? Okay. So what we're going to hope is that by the end of this session, and I'm very happy to see a few young people coming in, by the end of this session, we hope you have a little better understanding of what ICANN is, what happens within the ICANN community, and also from an entrepreneurial standpoint, some of the things that you can do to actually, as an entrepreneur, be more successful on the internet. We have a presenter from the new generic top-level domain area. He's coming in remotely. And we also have another presenter coming in from Belize, also to give you a Caribbean flavor of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about what ICANN is. Show of hands, is there anybody in here who uses the internet? Okay. What is the last thing that you do before you go to bed at night? Young people, what's the last thing you do before you go to bed, just before you fall asleep? WhatsApp. You make sure you send off your very last important, life-endangering WhatsApp message, and then you go to sleep. And what's the first thing you do when you wake in the morning? You pick up the phone and you go to see who WhatsApped you while you were sleeping. So from a social perspective, there's no question that the internet is critically important to our day-to-day lives. From a business perspective as well, that is the same thing. So you have all of these devices, mobile phones, tablets, desktop computers, our TV screens these days are connected to the internet, all of our security cameras, some of our fridges, and I've heard that some people even have dogs and cats who they've put, IP addresses on to keep track of them. But all of these devices that are connected to the internet must have a unique way of being reachable. We know those unique identifiers as IP addresses, 192.168, when you're configuring the router and so on, you see these numbers. And also we know the domain names, google.com, microsoft.com, facebook.com. So what the ICANN organization does is that we coordinate and manage the internet's unique system of identifiers. All of those numbers that go out to all of the devices, we have the master database, and we distribute that globally. And all of the domain names, some ending in .com, .org, .edu, and the new ones like .hotels and others that you will hear Alfredo talk about, all of those domain names are managed at the top level by the ICANN organization. And essentially what we do is we work with our partners to ensure that the internet actually works properly. And we have different kind of partners. We have partners like the organizations which distribute those numbers globally in the Caribbean. There are two organizations that distribute those numbers. One of them is represented in the room, and one of them is called LACNIC. And Kevon, perhaps, maybe if you could just stand so that everybody can see who you are. So Kevon takes care, and his organization takes care of distributing numbers to Latin America and certain parts of the Caribbean. And there's another organization which also was represented here earlier called ARIN, which distributes numbers to North America, Canada, and most of the English-speaking part of the Caribbean. So you have those kinds of organizations and other standards bodies like the IEEE that ICANN interacts with, and we work with ISOC and the United Nations and other organizations as well in terms of the development of policies. Now, there is something referred to as an ICANN ecosystem. Because when you say the word ICANN, you're not just talking about Albert Daniels, who happens to work for ICANN, and all of the other staff that work for ICANN. You're actually talking about an ICANN ecosystem that has three components. The most important component of the ICANN ecosystem is you, the multi-stakeholder global community. Representatives of governments, representatives of academia, representatives of the end user community, representatives of business, and so on, because you are the ones who actually get together either in a physical meeting in some part of the world or electronically to set the policies that guide the type of internet that we have. So you as a community develop policy, you say what you want policies on and what those guidelines should be. And once the ICANN board has agreed on those policies, the ICANN technical staff use those policies to determine and manage what kind of internet you actually have. So this is why we are really interested in seeing you come out to events like this so you can understand what ICANN is all about and what role you can play. And the ICANN organization is just the staff. We basically meet your needs. You tell us what the policy should be, and then we actually implement those policies. And then finally, you have the ICANN board that makes the final decision on what those policies should be. And that ICANN board itself is made up of persons like yourself from different backgrounds with different qualifications who get involved in different things. So ICANN, of course, manages these names and the numbers. And there is a system called the DNS, the Domain Name System. And that is simply a translation system that converts what we type in our web browser, facebook.com, google.com, into those numbers that we spoke about. So there is a whole industry based on those domain names and all of those IP addresses. And that is why we refer to it as the DNS industry. There are two types of domain names. There are the generic ones like .com, .org, and so on, and other generic ones that you will hear Alfredo talk about as soon as I'm done. But you also have country code top-level domain names that represent countries. Does anybody know what the country code top-level domain name is for St. Kitts? Anybody besides Jason? What is it? .kn. Very good. There are countries that have been to in the Caribbean. When I ask that question, they can't tell me what the country code top-level domain is. But that is a very important resource for you. And Jason is going to be talking a little bit about the .kn and what's been happening with it. So you have those two types of domain names, and you have the IP addresses. So what we try to do with VDECC, which stands for the Virtual DNS Entrepreneurship Center of the Caribbean, is develop a mechanism for us to see how we can build capacity for entrepreneurs across the Caribbean to take better advantage of the business opportunities that present themselves in this DNS industry. And we are hoping that that would also provide a launch pad for different kinds of businesses in St. Kitts and other countries to jump into the digital space. So we see VDECC, first of all, as a knowledge and networking sharing space. So in a VDECC like what we have here today, you would be hearing from other persons who have done something with the DNS industry. They've been developing websites, they've been selling domain names, they've been operating transaction processing systems. So they have made certain steps in advance of where we are today from a St. Kitts or broader Caribbean perspective. And the key point about VDECC is a sharing of experience and a methodology that we can replicate fairly easily from country to country. So some of the presenters that you will hear from today are not in St. Kitts, obviously, but we can still benefit from their experience. And then maybe tomorrow we can go to St. Vincent and we can do something similar. So VDECC was based on a concept of CELAC, which is a physical center that was actually set up by ICANN in Paraguay to do exactly the same thing. So there was a building and people would travel to Paraguay and attend the capacity building sessions. But that is not going to work for us in the Caribbean because we would have to jump on Liat. Does anybody here fly Liat? Yeah, that very nice airline. I mean, it's so complex that you can end up in one destination and your luggage, magically can end up in some other destination. But we have big challenges of travel in the Caribbean. So we would not be able to set up a center, for example, let's say we set it up in Trinidad and tell all of our Caribbean people, you have to go to Trinidad if you want to do capacity building. And this is why we came up with the concept of VDECC. So VDECC is supposed to work in a similar way to CELAC, but virtually. We have this tool called Adobe Connect, which allows presenters to come in from overseas and allows persons to follow online. And we also have developed a VDECC website. You see the URL there at the bottom, www.vdec.online. And the idea is that all of the content, all of the presentations, everything we do and say at a session like this will be recorded, and it will be available in e-learning courses through the VDECC website. Welcome, Natalie. Natalie is a very important person in St. Kitts, I hear. She does all of the weddings and so on, decorations. So see Natalie after the session. So for VDECC to be successful, we've gone into some partnerships. We've partnered with the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, which is why we are here today. So whenever the CTU is having events where there are participants, we try to have an element of VDECC on some occasions so that the participants who are there for the VDECC, for the CTU meeting, will also benefit from what we have to say at VDECC. We also collaborate with the Caribbean Network Operators Group, CaribNOG, which has events across the Caribbean, CANTO, the Caribbean Association of National Telecoms Operators, and the Latin American Caribbean Top-Level Domain Association for helping Caribbean CCTLDs. So it's a partnership effort because we know how it's spread across the Caribbean, and we launched earlier in the year in Trinidad and Tobago. This is the second edition of VDECC, and I've already gotten requests to do a similar event in St. Kitts, Nevis, and the Bahamas.